So this has been a very important question, obviously. It's an important question for me. Um, if God is a great exception, God is independent and not non-related. Um, if God has absolute brute power, these are all important dimensions of the tradition, but how are any of these grounding our gratitude for being, our worship for God? So I think that in process thought, there is a fundamental conviction that God is good. And in Christian process theology, certainly, not only Christian, that God is also love. And so when it comes to thinking about a God worthy of worship, power, independence, isolation are not on the table for the kinds of things that derive our worship um, or our response in a deep way. You may fear an omnipotent God, but worship and fear don't seem to blend together in a deep way. I mean, there's arguments about that. So for me, for process thinkers generally, God's goodness is affirmed. And if God's power needs to be rethought to preserve the life of God's goodness, then that's okay. So a God worthy of worship for me is a God that lives through the supremacy of its own goodness. That goodness itself is what God is and the foundation of God's being. And therefore that goodness is the reason, the rationale for the world, and in some sense points the arc of human purpose in the world towards goodness and value as well. So I've called it worship ontological gratitude at its basic level, because we are, in a sense, thankful for we're grateful for being in the fact that we ourselves exemplify some dimension of value. So there's a compass of value, and I think process thought is concerned to preserve that in God. And power doesn't come into play when it comes to worship. We think that's, on the whole, a slip to barbaric modes of thinking.